Welcome to the Happy Disruptors Podcast. If you're a creative thinker with an unconventional approach to your industry, you just might be a happy disruptor. Join your friends at the Great Outdoors Foundation for honest conversations about tackling critical issues like conservation with an uncritical disposition. If you like to smile and get things done, this is the podcast for you. Hello, and welcome to the Happy Disruptors Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hannah Inman. And today I'm joined by Todd. Todd, we're so happy to have you here. We've been waiting to have you on. We're excited to talk today about Iowa soybean and farmers. But first, can you introduce yourself?
You bet. Yes. Good afternoon. Thanks. Todd Sutphin. I'm the Conservation Services and Program Lead at the Iowa Soybean Association. I've had the privilege of being on staff for 23 years.
That's amazing.
So I've seen a lot happen over that time in the space of conservation. And excited to see what the future holds.
So for our listeners, can you just explain a little bit about Iowa Soybean and its mission, and then your role there at Iowa Soybean?
Sure. You know, when I look at my role at the Iowa Soybean Association, we're about production, profitability, and sustainability. We're unique. We're one of the largest state-based commodity groups in the U.S., and that we have an environmental or a conservation program. Mm-hmm. Most states do not.
Yeah.
So we're governed by a board of 22 farmer directors. And back in about 2000, they were interested in getting ahead of some of the questions that farmers were facing. One being water quality, which we're still dealing with now, and also on-farm research. So they started two programs back in the early 2000s. And one was the conservation program. And I was lucky enough to be hired by Roger Wolf.
Yep.
Many of our listeners will know Roger. He's a pioneer in the industry.
Yep.
And I remember during my interview, he had a stack on his desk, and Roger was a big thinker. And he says, there's 9 ideas on that stack right there alone that I want to tackle. And so as we built the program, you know, we took each one of those ideas and built the program up over the last 23 years.
That's amazing.
So it's been fun to kind of advance agricultural performance, work with farmers. You know, and the hat that we wear is we represent growers, but they're also concerned with sustainability. So.
Yeah, and I think I've always been so impressed about Iowa soybean and the proactive approach to sustainability and really seeing it as part of the farmer success story. Can you talk just a little bit about how you view conservation and success of farmers and how they work together?
Sure. We meet farmers where they're at. Mm-hmm. So every farm is unique, every farm's different, every farmer's different. There's really not a one-size-fits-all. So, you know, when I meet with a farmer, the hat that I wear is I'm representing them. I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm not trying to regulate anything. You know, we're concerned about their bottom line. We're concerned about their production. But we also want to address those conservation and sustainability concerns they have. And you walk any farm, and there's some portion of that farm that something could be done.
Yeah.
And, you know, that could be an infield nutrient management or soil health. That could be something on the edge of field. They've got a drainage issue. They got a poor performing soil or an area of their farm that we want to try to do something with. So, again, we meet them where they're at. We answer questions that they have. And I'm big on, and we're big on, better information for better decision making. Mm-hmm. So we really try to help provide them with the science and data information so a farmer can make a decision on their operation that fits them the best.
Well, that's a good segue because you oversee the Research Center for Farming Innovation, right? And the conservation program.
The conservation side. We've got a research agronomy unit, an analytics, and then the conservation team. So
what are some of the innovations that you're most proud of that have come out of that work?
Yeah, so we always joke that we've got 1 foot in the present and 1 foot in the future.
Yeah.
And innovation's in our name. And so we're always kind of on the edge of looking for new practices. Uh-huh. One of the early wins that I'm really proud about is we put one of the first bioreactors in the state. One of the groups that we help, what we represent and work with is Ag's Clean Water Alliance, consortium of ag retailers in Iowa. And we're doing water monitoring with them, but they had a question about what else can we be doing? Are there some new practices or things that we can be addressing to focus on water quality? And they had heard about this bioreactor practice. So I went over to Illinois, met with a researcher, came back, and Matt Helmers and I met in a conference room we drew out a design of what a bioreactor might look like based on one research paper. Got a farmer in Greene County that was willing to participate, and we put this bioreactor in. Mm-hmm. Had a field day. We had media there. We had folks from NRCS there. We had Iowa State folks there. Lots of questions. Did we do the first one right? No, it was square. They're rectangle now. But lots of questions. And, from there, research was done, designs changed, and it became a fundable practice that now farmers are installing. There's batch and builds, and you're seeing that happen. So that was kind of fun to be on the ground floor of a practice that's now being implemented in the nutrient reduction strategy.
Yeah.
So that's one example, and that's in the space that we're in, we have the ability to work on these kind of new practices and up and coming things.
So can you explain for those listeners, because we sort of represent the nexus between urban and rural, what a bioreactor is?
So Iowa's, especially central Iowa, is heavily tiled. So, those drain tiles then will go to a stream or a drainage ditch. And so we're intercepting some of that tile line and running it through a pit filled with wood chips. And the microbes on those wood chips will denitrify the nitrate and just release it as clean water.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. You just let Mother Nature do her thing.
Yeah.
Really, it's what you're doing.
Yeah, and we had John Swanson on the podcast, and he really accelerated some of those bioreactors being adopted, and we see the water quality impact from that, in 4 Mile Creek. So that is pretty exciting to be a part of something like that.
Yeah, and saturated buffers is similar. I mean, you've got a control box or control structure, and you're running the tile line parallel to the stream, and you're just letting Mother Nature do her thing.
Yeah. Amazing. Yep. Absolutely amazing.
Yep.
So Iowa Soybean has really invested in development of conservation agronomy as an industry. Why do you see that as the path forward for conservation in ag?
Yeah, so we work in Iowa. There's a lot of avenues that we need to take to work on conservation, and most farmers get their information from their local ag retailer or their co-op, and they're getting their information on chemical feed, fertilizer, that sort of thing, or seed and fertilizer. But conservation was kind of being missed. Mm-hmm. Farmers had questions on conservation, and to get those answers, they had to go to their local NRCS office or others. So we were looking at, can ag retail be a place in conservation where we could house a conservation agronomist, somebody that kind of bridged both worlds, conservation and agronomy, be a trusted resource for that farmer, and be a conduit to help get conservation on the ground. And so now as we start looking at these networks and we're putting conservation agronomists in ag retail locations across Iowa, farmers are now having a place to go answer or ask those questions.
Yeah.
And have a trusted resource. The navigating conservation can be complex, can be complicated. Mm-hmm. There's paperwork, there's how to do it, what's the next step. And so some farmers shy away from that just because they don't want to have to deal with everything that goes on with a complicated process. So ourselves or ag retail that has a conservation agronomist, they've got staff that can help navigate that process for that farmer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been groundbreaking in so many different levels. We obviously work a lot with trying to help fund some of the programs that these conservation agronomists are doing, but it starts to look at the farm from a holistic way, but it also starts to weave conservation into the total farm economy. And I just cannot, it's just one of those innovations that we've seen Iowa Soybean do that has really been a game changer. We think it's sort of a best case use and should be expanded. Do you see that continuing? Do you think co-ops are starting to see the conservation as part of their bottom line? Do they see sort of a path forward there? They're
starting to. We're trying to crack the code,
right?
On how to increase the pace and scale of conservation,
right?
I think ag retail is starting to figure out how conservation fits into that scenario. And can they So there's questions that come up is, can we improve farm efficiency, lower costs, improve yields, and still meet the needs of the farmer, but also conservation. So you're starting to kind of see that get blended together.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So we were sort of talking earlier, it's been an incredibly challenging year for soybean farmers, between all the different things that have happened. How do you see conservation as a component of the long-term viability of soybean farming? And can financial incentives tied to conservation start to help with farmers in improving their bottom line?
Yeah, as we were talking earlier, the markets are up and down right now. I mean, obviously they're down. It's kind of a challenging time. And, you start looking at a farm operation, and you start looking at, well, do I have parts of my farm that are not performing well? You really start to have some conservation discussions when you see some of these numbers coming in that ground's just not producing.
Right.
So as I look forward, there's a demand out there for conservation. We had a banner year just in the work that our small team does across Iowa, over 100 practices. And as it fits into a farmer's operation, I think that conversation is going to continue. Again, as I said, we meet farmers where they're at. We try to help identify where there are areas that are maybe underperforming or poor performing and have conservation discussions. It's interesting, and a lot of this ground, we don't always want to take ground out of production. We're looking at edge of field practices that don't take ground out of production.
Right.
But there might be some other practices that make sense in a farm operation: cover crops, nutrient management, manure management, different kinds of tillage. I think all those are going to factor in as we look at ways to improve efficiency on the farm. I remember when I first started in the industry, and I go to my first watershed meeting up in Greene County, and I start talking about conservation and environmental impacts and all that, and the farmers just glazed over, right?
Yeah.
So I started to spin it. I'm like, let's have a business conversation.
Right. Yeah.
So when you start looking at reducing inputs, or can you still maintain yields with less inputs? Or is that part of your farm you really want to continue putting effort into it, or do you want to look at maybe a conservation practice? So you start having these business conversations and efficiency, and suddenly it's a different conversation.
Right.
Because it's their bottom line. It's the ROI. It's the return on investment.
Right. I mean, that's something that we've been talking a lot about is, I think in the beginning, maybe conservation was sold as an also, or a nice to, or an add-on, but it really is part of the business practice of a farmer. And to your point, once you start talking that way, it becomes more than just a value proposition. It becomes a business decision.
It is a business decision, and I've been with soybeans for 23 years, and in that time, the conversation about conservation, water quality, soil health has changed immensely. You think about, are we making progress fast enough? Well, we've made progress in the time that I've been working with soybeans. To where we're having this conversation about conservation. And we're talking about implementation of new practices, and you got batch and builds. So the conversations are happening. We just got to figure out, again, how to crack the code, how to get more adoption across the landscape, and make it easy for farmers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the pieces with the conservation agronomy, and you sort of touched on this, but it does make it easier for the farmer to enroll or to adopt practices.
Yep.
I think people oftentimes, those that aren't on the farm, maybe don't understand sort of the burden of not just adopting practices, but implementing them.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit, I know you touched on it, but for those that aren't necessarily on the farm, how that has changed or starting to evolve.
Well, yeah. So, when we talk about some of these practices, whether it's a bioreactor or a wetland or cover crops, you're asking the farmer to take on the risk.
Right.
Right. So they're adopting a practice that, they've got equipment, they've got overhead, they've got decisions to make. And so when we're asking them to make a change, they're taking the risk. And so we help try to minimize that risk to figure out what works for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And risk management is the key to so many different businesses, and it's no different for the individual farmer.
You know, and they'll acknowledge that. I mean, you talk to a farmer and you go to a watershed meeting and you ask the question, how many of you are doing a good job? If they're still farming, they're doing a good job, they'll raise their hand. And then you pause and you be like, oh, how many of you can do one thing better? And most of them will raise their hand. You know, they know they can do one thing better. That's where we try to step in with the science and data, help them make the better decisions on the one thing they can do better.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. Incremental change, right?
Yep.
I heard something this last week. It's like evolution for the revolution, right? So you make enough of those incremental changes on larger acres, you start to see.
Yep.
So what is one or two misconceptions about conservation and agriculture that you'd like to address or you wish people knew?
Yeah, I don't think it's an either or. I think it's an and. You know, conservation can work in concert with agriculture. We're 85% row crop in Iowa. You know, so when you're working in this space, you're working with farmers, right? And you ask a farmer about leaving a legacy, wanting to leave the land better than they started, they all raise their hand. They want to do that. And so there's opportunities at every farm, depending on what that farmer wants to do, where they are in their operation. You know, we're there to help try to find that and bridge the two together.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, any final thoughts before we go into our whiteboard session?
You know, one thing about this space, the conservation space, we've built our program on partnerships. Partnerships are huge. You know, we can't do it alone. I always talk about if Iowa Soybean brings $1 to the table and then we've got a partner that brings $1 to the table, that's $2, then we can work. And it's interesting, I made the comment about conservation and farming in Iowa, again, 85% row crop. We work with a lot of different partners from state, federal, nonprofit, private. And, you know, oftentimes they've got overlapping missions focused around water quality or soil health or sustainability. And that's where we try to find that bridge. There's usually a Venn on a partnership. So we're working with groups like U.S. Fish and Wildlife, or their Nature Conservancy. I mean, they seem to be odd partners for a commodity group, right?
Right.
But they, too, are working with private landowners. They want to improve water quality. They understand the need for working lands in Iowa. And so those partnerships have built great collaboration, shared resources, adoption of practices, shared expertise.
Right.
So in the instance of U.S. Fish and Wildlife, one of the new practices that's just taken off are oxbows.
Yeah.
We're involved in over 57 this year. I mean, it's a huge number.
Yeah.
And, you know, oxbows, they have stack benefits: water quality, habitat, flood retention. But they're also built in the floodplain. And so U.S. Fish and Wildlife can help us navigate compliance, environmental regulation, along with their staff that helps with the technical expertise. So it's those partnerships that help us move conceptual practice to implementation. A farmer's not going to want to navigate all that. And so when they come to us and our partners, you know, we help them navigate that. We're starting to kind of we want to go down this path of that we're another option. So maybe 1 out of 10 goes to an NRCS field office. So, you know, where are the other 90% going? You know, they're going maybe on their own. They're talking to maybe a watershed coordinator. They're talking to Iowa Soybean. And when we meet with farmers, we don't try to push a program. We talk about what are your concerns on your farm, what are you trying to achieve, and then we try to pair them up with the right program.
Yeah.
Whether it's on the private side, it's a blended, it's strictly on the federal side. And all farmers are coming at this from a different angle. Some of them don't want to have anything to do with federal funding. But if we've got the ability to work with private dollars and implement a practice that we can get in, they're all for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's navigating those waters. It's how to find the right fit for the farmer, navigating the risk, looking at their bottom line. And then farmers, you know, they also want to be acknowledged that they're doing a good job. You know, so that outreach component's huge. I could be doing communication outreach 365 days a year.
Right.
Trying to get to audiences like this.
Yeah.
We were having a discussion earlier that farmers consume information across the spectrum. Mm-hmm. You've got your new emerging farmers that are probably more in tune with social media and digital. And then we've got older farmers that want paper. Mm-hmm. They want flyers. They want newsletters. And so as an organization, we struggle with how do you communicate across that spectrum.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's across the board.
Right.
So 20 years ago, there weren't podcasts. Mm-hmm. We weren't doing podcasts.
Right.
And so it's kind of nice to be able to do mediums like this to get to maybe the up and coming generation or those that are looking to consume more information in a different outlet.
Yeah. Yeah, we just had that discussion today too, all the different channels and, And
it's a challenge for us because, we think we've got it figured out and then somebody wants it mailed. Right?
Yeah.
They want it in print.
Yeah.
So if you look at our space, it's all the way from print media to online.
Yeah.
And everything in between.
I heard someone told me today that the mailed letter is back.
Yeah.
With the younger generation. I don't know if that's true. Hannah Dake could probably tell us. A little bit.
A little bit.
I
don't really get anything fun in the mail anymore, so if it was fun, I'd actually probably read it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm tired of being overwhelmed with everything online.
Yes. It's crowded.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do water quality videos that break the logarithms, right?
Yes, very true.
So, I'll ask a question for you. So, Great Outdoors, you're on partnerships. You work on partnerships, obviously. That's your key to success. How do you view an organization like a commodity group like ourselves in this space? We're unique. We're always looking to do bigger and better projects. But, how do you view a commodity group in this space and next steps there?
Yeah. So we're very relationship and people driven, right? And so I think Iowa Soybean specifically has always had people like yourself and Roger and, the whole team is just very aligned in values, right? We're pragmatic. Yep. We understand that this is not a zero-sum game, that it has to work together. Yep. We want farmers to be profitable and happy and, and that there are barriers to conservation and water quality. And so to us, commodity groups like Iowa Soybean are the experts, right? They're the experts in not just the crop and the science, but also in the farmer relationship. Good. And so we often try to approach our partnerships in support, right? Like the conservation agronomist program that Iowa Soybean has done, I think has been one of the most revolutionary things in the sense that it provides true assistance to the farmer in a whole farm holistic sense, but also removes those barriers where it's not just, you go to a farm services office, it's just to get that service for conservation. And the burden is, the amount of paperwork, we've filled it out. These federal programs are not easy. Mm-hmm. And you think of a farmer, all the things that they have to do in a day or a season, we have to make it easier and we have to remove some of that burden and de-risk it, to your point. Yep. And so that conservation agronomists and by extension, the co-ops help play that role and help to start looking at it as a holistic solution, not just a one-off. Yep. And so I think that Iowa Soybean taught us a lot about what is best for the farmer or how best to help a farmer to accelerate the pace of conservation. And we think that more programs like this are necessary. And just looking at it from, putting yourself in the place of the farmer, knowing you have, it's incredibly difficult. This year's incredibly difficult, but we've had, it goes up and down. And so trying to make a decision for the long term for your family, for your farm that you hope is multi-generational, there's just a lot of competing priorities. And so we appreciate that the work that Iowa Soybean and others have done to help make that decision making process simpler and de-risking it. And so we just want to help, right? Whether that's having funding available for more education for more agronomists, funding the or educating the agronomists more in partnership with you guys, or just having the funding on the back end to make conversions happen when a farmer's ready to come to the table. But we just love the work that you guys are doing, and we try to model that out everywhere that we're at.
It's an interesting space. I was looking at some notes earlier this morning, and they talked about the infinite game, where conservation is kind of an infinite game, where the players are always changing, the rules are always changing, the market's always changing, and organizations like ourselves have to be flexible and nimble and navigate to be able to adapt.
Right.
Just like farmers do, right?
Right.
Yeah, because what happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago may not be the same that's going to be 5 or 10 years going forward.
Right.
And so, as we build these partnerships and more farmers become aware, I'm optimistic on what the future looks like in the space of conservation.
Yeah.
I'm a watershed planner guy. So when I first came on board at the Iowa Soybean Association, I was writing watershed plans for watersheds across the state. And I really liked that approach because it's geographically placed. You get a group of farmers in a watershed that have similar resource concerns. They farm similarly, and we would address the resource concerns and look for solutions that fit their operations in their part of the state.
Yeah.
You made a reference a couple of weeks ago about the watershed approach, and that's an approach that we have supported for 20 plus years at the Iowa Soybean Association. I think that's what's needed. It's the upstream, downstream. It's connecting farmers with those resources, identifying practices that work, and moving on to the next watershed and doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think I love the watershed approach too, and because I think a lot of times in conservation, especially from like a federal level, by necessity, we try to have this, even from a statewide, we try to have this, blanket approach, right?
Yeah.
And by Mother Nature, no crop is different, even within no acre is the same, even within one operation, let alone from, southwest to northeast Iowa.
Right.
And so I think it's having more of the principles or the metrics of what we're all trying to achieve, but then the flexibility within. And that's really a lot easier at the watershed approach, but also at the individual co-op level, right?
Yeah, we, back probably in the mid-teens, well, take that back, even starting when I started my career, we were doing watershed plans, and there was more funding for watershed planning back in the early part of my career. And what I liked about that approach, what happens now is a lot of programs, they just want to go straight to implementation.
Right.
You got the money, let's just go and put practices on the ground. What I like about a planning approach is that you identify resource concerns, you get a game plan or a strategy, and you develop this long-term vision of what your watershed wants to look like.
Yes.
And you can actually identify where practices need to go. You can break it down by, maybe 4 or 5 year increments, so you can actually go after funding and hit your targets, hit your metrics to achieve the plan of the goal, or the goal of the plan, excuse me. And we've moved a little bit away from that. And we've gone more into just straight up implementation. Shortly after the passage of the nutrient reduction strategy back in 2013, we were still doing a ton of watershed plans, and we had done about 23 plans after the passage of the reduction strategy. And those plans, once they were written, brought in $38 million for conservation work in these watersheds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, we haven't talked about Iowa Soybean supports Iowa, has been a big supporter of it. I remember in the early days, we would go down to the State House and they were asking, well, what would you do if the money came? And we outlined our watershed approach. Say, hey, here's an active watershed. We've gone through this process. Farmers have been engaged. We've identified practices that they want to tackle. Here's the price tag.
Yeah.
And here's where they can go.
Right.
You know, so we actually had a playbook, a shovel-ready plan that we could implement right away.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we feel like that's the key on anything, whether we're doing, you know, outdoor recreation projects, having that plan, and especially something as large as a watershed management approach, having that plan, because as you said, it's an infinite game.
Yeah.
Things change, players change, funding streams change, all of that. But usually it'll help focus the next step.
Yep.
So the next person that comes into a leadership role or into that position, or the next funding stream that comes up, whether it's, you know, COVID or the Inflation Reduction Act or whatever that next crisis is, and the response that comes out of it, you have the plan to implement.
Yep.
And it is shovel ready, as you said. Mm-hmm. So that's a really interesting, and maybe that's something that we should work on, is how do we implement funding for watershed management
I'd be all
plans.
supportive of that. Yeah. I mean, because I've seen it work. They're successful. You know, we've gone to more of the Watershed Management Authority. Mm-hmm. So these are big plans.
Right.
And the challenge with the big plans is you really need to target those.
Right.
You know, so in those plans, you almost need to go down to the Huck 12.
Right.
For the listeners, the Huck 12 is a watershed that's 20, 30, 35,000 acres.
Yeah.
You know, it's manageable. You got maybe 50 to 70 farmers in that sub-watershed. So as you look at a watershed management authority plan, trying to actually have targeted areas that you want to focus your work on immediately, rather than try to do everything at once.
Yeah.
When I first started, Lake Rathbun, they had a watershed plan, and they had areas that they wanted to target and work on conservation. So whenever a funding source came out, like you said, you know, what was the next cycle, they were able to take their plan and say, hey, they would take not the whole watershed, you know, they got this section, and they would submit an application and they would get funded.
Yeah.
And I saw that, I'm like, that's what we need to be doing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, now with batch and build, could you imagine you do that plan and then you layer batch and build on top of it? I mean, we just figured it out today.
Yeah. And you think, exactly. And, you know, you look at, okay, so let's say, you know, obviously long-term funding could always be challenging, and you want to be, you want to look at that long-term funding as being implemented efficiently.
Right.
Well, if you go to a watershed plan that they've gone through the process and they're ready to go, I mean, that's a good use of those dollars.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yes. We just figured out we're going to have to whiteboard that out. Put together the graph. Speaking of whiteboarding, we're gonna whiteboard real quick. So the let's whiteboard it. Now you can either draw a picture or just write a few words, whatever you want to do. What about the integration of conservation and agriculture gives you the most hope for our collective future? Okay, so and we have these nice little whiteboards right here.
Okay.
And while you're doing that, I didn't even think about mine. Usually Katie thinks about her answer before this. I did not do that.
So one more time on the question.
What about the integration of conservation and agriculture gives you the most hope for our collective future?
Okay.
So while you're doing that, thank you for being with us today. We hope that you will subscribe and share the podcast, the Happy Disruptors Podcast. And don't worry, Katie will be back in a few. She's a much better host than I am. I'm better as like the side person. So thank you, though, for being with us today.
This is a great conversation. I jokingly this morning said, I want to be the happy innovator.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So, I mean, it's in our name.
Yes.
Research Center for Farming Innovation, but, you know, innovative ideas to promote conservation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the happy innovator.
That's like the perfect partner to us. All right. Do you want to go first? Or do you want me to?
You go first.
Okay. So I think for me, it's something that you said about the infinite game. Now I'm going to be thinking about that all night. But one of the things that I feel that we are at right now is that all the foundational work that's been done the last 20 years between different or within different organizations, like the work that you and Roger have done, the work at the Great Outdoors at Polk County, all of these partnerships. I feel like we're finally building on a solid foundation that helps to, we just keep getting better and we keep putting in the key pieces, right? Like we're doing the next level for the conservation agronomists, and that was such an important piece. And now the education and some of the financial tools that are being built with that. I'm very excited about what that does.
I went with, we do a lot of diagrams at
Yes,
ISA.
yeah.
So I went with a Venn diagram. So you got agriculture, conservation, and science.
Yes.
And where they connect is where you have the success.
I love that.
Yes. So as we look at the intersection, as you mentioned in the question, it's right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is definitely like where the success of Iowa Soybean and others lies. So I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for being with us today. Todd, thank you for
bet.
being with us. This was a great conversation. I'm sure we'll have you on in the future.
Excellent. Love to. It was fun.
Yeah. We'll launch some
it.
new pilot programs and come back and talk about them. Thanks for joining us today and have a great day.